Hello, everyone. Welcome back for day two. So, yesterday we talked about money and your money mindset and why that was so crucial. And today is another kind of a mindset issue, I think, because for me, as part of the reason that I call this challenge the game changer is because I think you can learn all the skills in the world, you can have templates for things, but it is your mindset and how you think about things that really can literally change the game in the way that you work. So today we're talking about networking. And I call it networking without the sleaze or networking without schmoozing, because that kind of sort of, glad handing type of thing really makes me feel quite nauseous when I think about networking in that way. But I'll tell you a bit about what we're going to talk about today. So first, I'm going to tell you how I built my own network, which I feel like is one of my most powerful assets as a freelancer. And then I'm going to talk about community and connection being more important than contacts, making contacts just for the sake of it. And then we're going to talk about ways of networking that suit you. So the reason this is such an important thing to me is because it really is an issue. It's a kind of part of freelancing that I used to hate. I really hated networking. And since I've thought about it in a different way, it's transformed how I freelance in general, and it's really transformed what networking means to me. So when I say the word network, and for me, the other thing is that now my network has become, it's way more than just a bunch of kind of LinkedIn connections or, the odd person that I meet at a conference. It's become something much bigger and foundational, but it wasn't always the case. So the word networking, when I say that, you're all going to have different ideas about what that means. Some of you might think of going to those kind of big conferences where you get those awful sticky, name tags that always seem to fall off and fall on your coat or your bag or whatever, where you're walking around a big room where you don't really know many people and you're trying to impress them, really, aren't you? You're trying to make connections. Or you might think of those kind of like after work events, maybe after a talk that you've attended in person and there's like cheese and usually some pretty crappy warm wine. And then you're trying to mingle and kind of network. So those, I think, what are often described as networking events. So tell me in the comments, by the way, what you think of when I say the word networking. I'm interested to know what it means to you and what that word brings up. Remember also that if you're commenting from Facebook, you need to go through that StreamYard link so that I can see your name. I'll still see your comment, I just won't see your name. Morning, Susan. I've just seen Susan's made a comment on there. So I'm going to tell you why I used to hate networking so much. These sorts of events used to make me feel really nauseous. So I'm quite an introvert in these types of situations. I'm quite sociable and quite friendly. When you meet me in person, and some of you have met me in person, hopefully I've been very friendly and sociable. But in these big conferences, I really kind of freeze. And one of my very first networking events was when I was studying for my master's. So I studied, I had a science degree already. I knew I wanted to go into communications, writing, journalism in general. And I did a master's in science communication at Imperial College. And this was a great master's. And there's someone in this Facebook group who was on that same master's. So, you'll know how good it is. And the teachers brought together this incredible array for our end of year there was an end of year sort of show where we were presenting our kind of end of year work. And then they brought together like journalists, broadcasters like newsreaders, BBC journalists, radio journalists as well, writers, like a whole incredible group of people. And we were supposed to network with them. And I spent this whole evening just kind of awkwardly moving from group to group and, like being in one group and then sort of getting in my head about what was I going to say, and then and then sort of like that really awkward thing when you're about to say something and then someone else talks and you think, oh, okay, I'll wait for my next moment. And it was just horrible. And I went around trying to connect with these different experts who were there ready to talk to us as students. And often when you're networking, the people you might want to talk to are not that interested in talking to you, but these people were primed to listen to what I had to say. And so I really felt the pressure to talk to them about my ideas and have them go away and think, oh, that was an incredible person I met tonight. And I really struggled, and I could see my peers who were more or less my age being really good at this, seemingly, like, having conversations about what it would be like to get into TV or into radio, or, they just were seeming to do it really easily and seamlessly. The only conversation that I had that evening was with a scientist. I don't know why he was there. I think he also had this was before podcast, so maybe he had like a radio show or something. And he was a scientist who studied bugs in South American jungles. Now, I didn't have a particular interest in that, but he was passionate about what he did. He loved talking about it. Scientists usually love, I've never met a scientist who doesn't want to talk about what they do, because it comes from such a place of passion and often obsession that they just want to talk to anyone who will listen, which is why I really love being a science journalist, because I'm not trying to extract information that people don't want to give me. And so I had a great conversation about bugs in South America. Can't tell you much about it now because it was many years ago. But I left this event feeling really like I'd failed. Like I just thought, oh, come on, Priya, you had a golden opportunity here and you just blew it because you couldn't talk to people. And the only person you spoke to was that bug guy whose card I took home with me. And I went away and it really kind of crushed me for a bit. And I actually thought, maybe I can't be a journalist. If I can't network and, this is where I'm supposed to be making connections. I just thought, how can I actually do this as a job? And then once the dust had sort of settled a little bit, I then reflected on that event and what had kind of gone right as well as what had gone wrong. And I realized that the reason I liked speaking to that scientist is because there was no agenda between us. I wasn't trying to get anything from him. He wasn't trying to get anything from me. We were just talking about something he really loved, was really passionate about. And I was asking him questions as someone who's really interested in science. And so it was a very agenda-free conversation. And what this taught me, it took me a while to be able to kind of process this, but what it taught me is the type of connections that I like to make, the type of networks that I like to build. And I realized that actually the fact that I could speak to this scientist about, a little bit of a sore throat, I have some peppermint tea on hand. The fact that I could talk to this scientist so easily about a subject that I knew very little about actually made me realize, okay, well, this is where I need to build my networks. This is how I need to build it. So what I then started to do was think of networking in a different way. And I don't mean immediately after that event. I mean, like over the course of a few years. I then realized, sorry. Excuse my throat, everyone. I then realized that my network really needed to be like a constellation. This is what I've really built for myself. It's a constellation. And what I mean by that is I have these little clusters of stars around my constellation. I have experts in my field who I trust, who are credible, who I can go to for a quote. Let's say I'm writing a piece on malaria. I know this person I trust. I know the organization they work for. I have people that there are experts I've been working with for a long time, and I can go in and ask them for their advice about something. So I might be covering a story about something, and then I can go to them and say, not for a quote, but just to say, what do you think of this? Do you think it's reliable? Do you think there's something in it? So that's kind of my expert network, I guess. And some of those experts will also be people who can refer me to their colleagues for work, because they know I'm a journalist, they've talked to me before, they know what I'm about, what my skills are. So they might refer work onto me. Then I have broadly, there's the social media network, I guess. I mean, that is part of a network. For some people, it's maybe their most important network. For me, I would say it's one of many. Like, I'm not someone who completely gets all my work through social media, or who operates solely through social media. And I actually don't think, this is why I like the Constellation idea, because I don't think any one piece should take such priority over the others, because they each have different functions that they serve. But within social media, there are private groups that I'm part of, Facebook groups and LinkedIn groups with other freelancers. For me, it's freelance writers mostly. And these groups are really, really valuable. And I've come to them fairly late. I mean, Facebook groups are really old. They've been going more or less as long as Facebook has. But so easily like 10, 15 years. But I've only come to them, I would say, in the last three to 4 years, maybe. I think because I didn't really see, I don't know. I just thought, are they going to be useful? Are they going to bring anything to my life that I don't already have from a fairly well-established network? And the answer is they do, because they're private, and there are rules usually for how these groups work. You can have quite frank conversations with people you may never have met in person and may never meet, and people you don't really know, but you can just kind of get to the heart of something that you want to talk about. And these groups, I think, can be a really good substitute for another part of the Constellation, which for me are friends who are freelancers. So they're either freelance writers and they're in my industry, so we're very closely aligned in what we do. Or they may be, freelance friends who are freelancers, but they're not in my industry. But they're a huge source of support in terms of being able to run things past. But people who don't necessarily have that network, Facebook groups and LinkedIn groups can actually be incredibly helpful. And I think they're so important because it can be very lonely working as a freelancer. It can be very isolating. Even if you've got friends who are in the same industry as you, if they are in a staff job and they've never been freelance, and probably a lot of you have experienced this, where it's very difficult to understand the particularities of freelance life, and what it's like to do business as a freelancer, and negotiate and so on, because they've never been in that position. So they can only offer you information, that regards to your particular type of work. But when you have a network like this, you basically have an inbuilt referral system. You've got people who will refer work to you and so on. You've got an inbuilt advisory board. I have a group of people who I would go to if I needed advice. For example, a client has decided to structure a contract in a particular way, or has decided to set a payment schedule in a particular way, and I might go, hey, do you think this is reasonable? Should I push back on it? Should I not? You want people to brainstorm with. And this is really important. And the reason I created this and the reason I need this is because, in effect, when you're a freelancer, you need to create equivalent systems often, not entirely or not to the same degree, but kind of equivalent systems in terms of functionality that you would normally have in a company. And it's not to say that companies are always very supportive, or that you have all the support you need. Just because there's an HR department does not mean, as I'm sure like some of you have experienced, I definitely have, doesn't mean that they are the support that you think they're going to be. But you do have a support structure around you. And I talk a lot about remembering as a freelancer that you are a business, and that even if you feel like you're just working on the sofa in your comfy pants, it doesn't mean that you're not. And relationship building is so important in business. I mean, like, businesses spend sometimes half of their time just nurturing relationships. But the other aspect to this also is that remembering that true networking is about connection and it's about community and connectivity. So if you think of what a network really looks like, you've got one person connected to a bunch of different people. Each of those people are then connected to a bunch of other people. So networks really are a big group of interconnected people. We are not, a network shouldn't be seen as just going to someone for what can I get from this relationship? What can I get from this connection? What could that person do for me? How could they promote my work? How could they, because when people see it as very one-sided, which a lot of people do, it isn't then a true network that actually functions as a support system as they need it to, because any relationship has to go two ways. I mean, I've definitely been in friendships, and maybe you have too, where whether they're professional friendships or personal friendships, where when it's a very one-way street, either you kind of want to pull back, but it also doesn't encourage you to give much to that other person, because you just think, well, they just take all the time. And so it really is important when we're thinking of networking, not to think about it as, who can I now kind of tap up for some new thing that they can give me? But what meaningful community can I be part of? What meaningful connections can I build where not only do they have something to offer me, but I have something to offer them? So I think a big thing that none of us really think about, or many of us don't think about when we're thinking about networking, is you supporting other people, you sharing your knowledge and giving advice where you can in your area of expertise, let's say, recommending other people for work. And I think some of the most successful freelancers I have seen are people who, without hesitation, will recommend other people, other friends, sometimes people they don't know very well. They are the people who will often on their social media, you will see them posting job opportunities or, freelance gigs that they're happy to share. Now, there may be certain situations where you're applying, let's say, for a particular grant or a scholarship or something, where you know that there's only one or two opportunities. I can understand if you don't then blast that out on your LinkedIn. That's fair enough. But there are so many times where we can be generous to other freelancers and we can give advice. But we might have an instinct to kind of gatekeep that advice because of a feeling of like, oh, well, do I want to pass all this stuff on? But I would say from my own experience, the more generous you are, the more you pass on, the more advice you give, you tend to get that back. I mean, that's maybe how I feel in life in general, but definitely in freelance life, I've had so much generosity from other people. And I do think it's because I've always tried to pass things on myself. So that's why I want us to think about networking in a different way. So, okay, I'm going to go to some of these comments now. People really find this nerve-wracking. It's true. Tamara says, think of networking as keeping up contacts over a long term, remaining in touch with the ability to call on people when the need arises, and equally to be available when my contacts need me. Absolutely. So when you're available for other people, they then tend to remember that. Caitlin says, the thought of networking fills me with dread. I 100% hear you, and don't enjoy being in a room with a load of strangers making small talk, but it's totally different in a one-to-one basis or a small group. Something that I would say that has really helped me with this, when you look out into a room and you can just see a sea of people, it might just be a way of tricking your brain, but I now try to see that big group of people as a collection of little groups of people. So I tend to not, because you're never going to go into a room unless you've got like a megaphone or you're moderating an event or something like that. You're never going to have to talk to the entire group at once or to the entire room at once. And even individually, you're not trying to talk to a whole group of people. So maybe look for what I would normally do in this situation, even though I'm more comfortable with it. I would go and find, let's say, a couple of people talking to each other, where I then join them as a little trio. Because to me, that's like a group size that I can feel comfortable going up to. And I might then just have a thought in my head about what I want to say to someone, depending if it's a conference. I might say, how are you finding things? Have you been to any interesting sessions? Or any kind of icebreaker. It almost doesn't matter. I think I used to really overthink what I said to people. It almost doesn't matter. Like if you go up to someone, you have a smile on your face and you say, hey, how are you finding things? That's usually enough to kind of break the ice. And Rebecca says, trying to think of it as being about my work than about myself. I do think that really helps as well, because so many times we kind of go into a situation thinking like you're selling yourself so much, and there is a little bit of that because you are your own advocate. But actually, if you're doing it in a professional setting, you're not trying to make a new best friend here. You are just trying to exchange. You're just trying to tell people what you do and to let them know a little bit about you and to find something out about the other person. So kind of minimizing, I guess, the risk or the perception of risk can be a really, really good way to do it, I think. So what I would encourage you to do is to think about ways in which you can network that feel right to you. So if you like going into big groups, go at it. If you don't, and you're more like me, where you like smaller sort of sessions or smaller groups, I find, like I said, the private Facebook groups, and when I say private, I don't mean, by the way, that someone's personal group that only 10 people are in, but a particular group associated with something. So I'm in a group for science writers, and it's in a private group because the admin then lets people in. Maybe this is a very obvious thing, but I just wanted to clarify that. So your action for today, because we're at the end of this session, is to think of one piece of your constellation that you can nurture. So it could be other freelancers that you have been in touch with, but you've kind of lost touch for whatever reason. Lots of connections, by the way, will have gone cold because of the pandemic when we didn't see people in person. And although in-person events have now come back with a bang, which I feel like lots of us thought they wouldn't, myself included, but people are just more desperate than ever, it feels like, to be with other people. I try not to use the word post-pandemic because I don't think we are post-pandemic, but I understand everyone kind of needs to get back to normal, really. So if you feel comfortable going to in-person events, or it might even be like, it doesn't necessarily have to be in your area, even of expertise. It could be like I'm part of a co-working, I go to a co-working space about 15 minutes away. There are lots of other freelancers there. And some of them are writers, not all of them. I haven't yet met a science writer there, but they do lots of after work events, like almost every day. There's something on at like 7 o'clock or so. And I don't go out of laziness, because by 7 o'clock, I like to be on the sofa in my comfy clothes. And I also have a small kid, so that's my excuse for staying at home. But I know that if I wanted to build and nurture my network, I could just go to one of those. And in a way, if it's not in your immediately relevant to you, it might be a bit less high stakes. So if I was going into a group of science writers, for example, I would feel much more pressure to kind of show who I am and, maybe impress them with what I'm doing, or I would feel that pressure a lot more than if I'm just going into a group of freelancers, some of whom may be designers or, artists or other things. So pick one relationship that you could nurture, or one that you could start. So it might be joining an online Facebook or LinkedIn group. It could be, it might be an event that you were umming and ahhing about whether to go to. It could even just be a lunchtime session that maybe an organization you're affiliated to is holding. Anything at all, just to get you, but in a way that feels comfortable to you. Crucially, this is not about pushing yourself out of your comfort zone. Sometimes that can be useful, but for this, I want us to stay very much in our comfort zones, because when you're not in your comfort zone, you don't feel confident. And so much of this is just about confidence, and about how you can make a connection or reach out to someone in a way that doesn't feel weird to you. So do whatever feels comfortable. There's someone on Facebook who just said, really agrees on the sharing and taking part. There's so many opportunities out there. And yes to private Facebook and LinkedIn groups, and they're a member of these and they're incredibly active. And that's actually a really good point, that they need to be active for it to feel good to you, because I've joined several LinkedIn and Facebook groups where all people do is like go in once every few months and post something that they're promoting. And that isn't real, that isn't real connection or connectivity or community. But ones where people are genuinely saying, hey, what do you guys think about this? Or, oh, I saw this cool thing. Might be useful for some of you. Those are the ones you need to seek out. So be prudent maybe when you're joining some of these groups. Sometimes you join and it needs time for you to realize. So that is your action for today. The replay of this will be, it will be in the Facebook group. It'll also be on LinkedIn and YouTube. And I'm going to put the actions for this group into the Facebook group today. Okay. Thank you so much, everyone who's here. If you're watching this on replay, thank you for watching it. I realize not everyone can make it in the middle of the day. And I will see you tomorrow for our final session on building your personal brand. It's going to be a really good one. Thank you, everyone. Bye.